You were there when they needed you. Not once. Consistently. You showed up for the moves, the hospital visits, the meals after the funeral. You prayed for people by name. You remembered the details. You followed up 3 weeks later when everyone else had moved on. You gave when giving cost you something. You served in the roles nobody wanted because somebody had to, and you did it not for recognition, but because it was the right thing and you were the person willing to do it. You were the person the community functioned because of, even if they never quite said it that way. And then something happened to you, and you waited. Not dramatically, not with a list of expectations. You just waited for the community to do what community does. To show up the way you had shown up. To remember. To follow up. To be there in the specific way you'd been there for everyone else. And it didn't quite happen. Maybe someone said the right things initially, but the follow-through wasn't there. The specific kind of presence you'd given to others, the sustained, remembering, I haven't forgotten about this kind, that didn't come back to you. And you told yourself it was fine. And then time passed. And still, nothing that matched what you'd poured in. And now you're carrying something you don't know how to say out loud. Because saying it feels like betrayal. Like criticizing the church is criticizing God. So you've kept it inside. The love for God that's still completely real. And a wound from the community that's also completely real. And the impossibility of holding both without feeling like one of them is a lie. Here's what makes it so hard to process. The church didn't do anything dramatic. There was no falling out, no confrontation, no moment you can point to and say, that's when it broke. It was the accumulation of ordinary absences. The meal train that didn't materialize. The check-in that stopped after the first week. The Sunday you came in clearly not okay and nobody asked. Each one, on its own, was forgivable. People get busy. People forget. But the accumulation, the pattern of your needs landing without traction while other people's needs mobilize the community. That pattern started to mean something. And what it started to mean was, you matter here differently than other people matter here. Not less beloved by God, less visible to the people. And the specific grief of that, of being unseen by the community you made yourself visible for, is one of the most particular kinds of pain there is. Because you didn't just attend this community. You built it. With your presence and your service and your showing up. And it didn't build back. And admitting that feels like ingratitude. Like you should be grateful for what you have instead of grieving what you didn't receive. But grief and gratitude can coexist. And what you're feeling isn't disloyalty. It's honesty about a wound that happened in a place that was supposed to be safe. Here's something worth naming. The church is made of people. And people, even people who love God, even people who are trying, have a limited capacity for sustained attention. They mobilize for crises they can see. They show up for needs that fit their available language for helping. And they often miss the needs that are harder to name. The quiet suffering. The grief that doesn't look like grief from the outside. The person who is still functioning, still serving, still showing up, and falling apart where no one can see. You were that person, and the community's failure to see you was not malice. It was limitation. The same limitation that makes visible suffering easier to respond to than invisible suffering. An understanding that doesn't make the wound smaller, but it changes the nature of what happened. The community missed you because you were carrying yourself too well, because you had practiced for years being the person who holds it together. And when you needed to be held, you didn't know how to stop holding yourself. That's not absolution for their absence. That's context for a wound that doesn't have a villain. Here's a distinction that might change something. God and the church are not the same thing. That sounds obvious. But when the church wounds you, the wound can feel like it comes from God. Because you encounter God through community. Because the church is supposed to represent Him. Because loving God and loving the church have been so intertwined in your experience that damage to one feels like damage to both. But they are not the same. God did not absent Himself when the meal train didn't materialize. God did not go quiet when the check-in stopped after the first week. God was present in every moment the community was not. Not compensating for the absence. Present in a different way than the community could have been. In the specific, internal, unreachable by others way that only He can be. And the love you have for God, which you correctly identified as still completely real, that love is not in conflict with the wound from the community. They're separate things. The church failed you in some of the ways that human communities fail, and God did not. And you're allowed to be honest about both of those things simultaneously, without the honesty about the church undermining the love for God, without the love for God requiring you to minimize what the church didn't do. Both things can be true. The wound is real, and the love is real, and you don't have to resolve the tension by dismissing either one. Think about the difference between a person and the organization they work for. You can deeply love a colleague and simultaneously be wounded by how the organization treated you. Those are not the same relationship. The colleague's goodness doesn't require you to pretend the organization did right by you. They're separate. God is the colleague. The church is the organization. And the organization, built from people with limitations, blind spots, and finite capacity for sustained attention, failed you in some of the ways organizations fail people. Not because God sanctioned it, not because your love for God required you to absorb it without naming it, but because human communities, even ones trying to reflect something divine, are still human. And human means limited. And limited means sometimes the person who is given the most is the one who falls through the gap. Not because they matter least, because their capacity to carry themselves made them the easiest to miss. You fell through a gap. Not through God's hands, through the limitations of the people who were supposed to be his hands in that moment. And those are not the same thing. Paul wrote to a church that had wounded him. The Corinthians had questioned his authority, preferred other teachers, and made his ministry among them more painful than it should have been. And he wrote to them anyway, not pretending the wounds weren't real, not absorbing the hurt as though it hadn't happened. He named it. He described the specific ways the community had failed to be what a community should be. And then he kept loving them, not because the wound didn't count, because his love for them was not contingent on their love for him. He had learned, and he said this explicitly, to be content in all circumstances, not to pretend all circumstances were equal, to hold the wound and the love at the same time, without the wound canceling the love, without the love requiring the wound to be minimized. And then there's Jesus, who wept over Jerusalem, the city that would reject him, the institution that would condemn him. And he wept, not because he was naive about what they would do, because the love was real regardless of what the institution would fail to be. You are allowed to love your church and grieve what it didn't give you. That's not disloyalty. That's the most honest form of love there is. The kind that sees clearly and loves anyway. So here's what I want to say to you directly. You are not betraying God by naming this wound. You are not being disloyal to the church by acknowledging what didn't happen. You are being honest about something real. And honesty about a wound doesn't cancel the love that makes the wound possible. You can only be wounded by the community you loved. Indifference doesn't produce this kind of pain. The grief you're carrying is proof of how much you gave, and proof that the love was real. You can only be wounded this specifically by a community you were this committed to. What you gave, the years of showing up, the service that cost you, is not diminished by what you didn't receive in return. You gave because of who you are, and who you are doesn't change because the community didn't mirror it back. You are not owed a perfect community, but you are allowed to grieve the gap between what you gave and what you received. And you're allowed to love God fully while holding the wound from the community honestly. Those two things are not in conflict. They never were. God and the church are not the same relationship. And the love you have for one does not require you to pretend the other didn't fail you. You can hold both. The love that's still real, and the wound that's also real, and bring them both to God, who was present in every moment the community was not. Before you go, type these words in the comments. I can love God and grieve the church at the same time. Not as a critique, as a permission to stop trying to resolve a tension that isn't meant to be resolved, and to let both things be true, because they are.